Good evening, everyone. Child psychology, module number 19. We have covered thus far 18 modules in child psychology. Let's look at what we are covering tonight. We're looking at module 19, gender roles and differences. What we will cover in this next 15-20 minutes, the difference between sex and gender, understanding how gender identity develops. We'll also learn about how gender, generally children express their gender, or the concept of non-conforming to gender or being transgender. We'll also look at the mental health and gender identity. These are the 5 objectives we have for tonight. Gender roles and differences between genders is a hot topic these days. And depending on who you ask, there are only 2 genders or many. So the concept of gender identity is something that parents and caregivers should always be aware of. And this module will focus on this. The difference between sex and gender, let's look at that first. So for the most children, being a boy or a girl is very natural. Now, while a child is born, babies are said to be male or female based on their physical characteristics. Now, this is referred to as sex of the baby. When a child can express themselves, they will declare to be a baby boy or a baby girl, or in some cases, somewhere in between. This is referred to as child's gender identity. Most children have a gender identity that aligns with their sex. But for some children, the path between their sex and gender is not clear. So the development of gender identity. At around the age of 2, children begin to notice their physical differences between males and females. And by the time they turn 3, most will label themselves to be as a boy or a girl, and they will play with the toys. For example, girls will play with dolls and the boys will play with trucks. But by the time they're 4, they will have a sense of their gender identity and practice gender role behavior, or doing things that the girls do and the boys will do what boys do. By the time they turn 6, most children, playmates, are those who are from the same sex, and they will play sports or activities that are associated with the same gender identity. So experts in gender urge parents and caregivers to allow children to make the choice when it comes to choosing the sports and activities they get involved in. Even if it is traditionally a boy activity, a girl wants to join, and vice versa. How do children generally express their gender identity? So in addition to playing sports or joining activities, children will typically display their gender identity in following ways. So for example, they will have preference for names. They will have preference for clothing style or hair, social behavior, physical gesture, or social relationships. These are some of the generally expression of the children when it comes to gender identity. Gender stereotypes. So when a child has an interest that they're different from the society deems belongs to a certain gender, the child is often discriminated against or being bullied. That's the gender stereotypes. It is natural feelings for a parent who wants their child to be socially accepted, but children must also feel comfortable in their own skin. Experts recommend that the parents should never force their children into traditional gender behavior. Instead, they should encourage their children to fulfill their own potential. Transgender and gender non-conforming children. Now, some children don't identify with any gender. So they feel as if they lie somewhere in between the genders or they have no gender. It is natural for parents and caregivers of these children to believe that this is simply a phase, and this phase will move on, and it will get over with that. Yes, it is true for some children, and but for others, however, it is how they are and will become most likely the transgender adults. This means that they identify with gender that is opposite of their birth sex. Now, parenting a child who is gender non-conforming, there is no way to predict how a gender non-conforming child might identify later in life. And this uncertainty often is difficult for the parent and caregivers of the child. In this situation, right, it is important for a parent and caregiver to make a home a safe place where the child is being loved unconditionally and feel safe. Research shows that our gender cannot truly be changed. So that's just the research suggests that gender cannot be changed, and it is something that cannot be changed by any intervention. Will a gender non-conforming child always grow up to be transgender? That's a question. So the research shows that the children who are consistent, persistent, and insistent about their chosen gender are those who are most likely to become adults who are transgender. So if the children who are consistent, they're persistent and insistent about their chosen gender, right? So if they are involved from the get-go into something of their liking, then the chances are most likely for them to become transgender. So it starts really early on. It is important that parents follow the lead of the child. However, this can be very difficult for parents for a number of reasons, including when they don't have an answer about their future of their child. Here are some of the signs that a gender non-conforming child may grow up to be a transgender. If a child has identified as a different gender for several years, it is unlikely the child will end up changing their mind. The most likely they will fall into the gender they chose early on. Sometimes a child who's gender non-conforming will change, and it usually occurs by the time they're 10 years old. A child might also change their gender identity when they go through puberty period. So, for example, a 12 years old physical male who has identified as a female since the age of 4 will likely remain transgender for life. Okay, so sometime a teen who has never shown any issue with gender identity or expression will start changing the idea as their body begins to change. Some parents of teens who are transgender are very confused and they aren't sure what to do. They're wondering if it is just only another phase or not. It is helpful for parents of these children to allow their teens to explore their gender and consult with the experts, the psychologists, therapists, counselors, those who are experienced with the gender, the transgender teenagers. What causes a child to identify with a new/different gender? That's another interesting question. We don't understand why some children begin to identify with the gender that is different than their birth sex. So there's really no clear understanding of it, right? So there's no clear answer to say, okay, because of A, B, and C. I mean, there are many hypotheses to say, yes, it is this. We could say, yes, it has to do with what we are eating. It is but truly there is nothing clear about it, nothing identify why birth, sex, gender for somebody to seek a change. However, the research believe that it is strongly biological and possibly social. Again, that's just the research that believes that it could be something biological strongly or possibly social. There is no evidence, like I said, at all that parenting has anything to do with it, with the gender identity. So parenting has nothing to do with it. That crosses out. There's no evidence that childhood trauma causing the non-conforming gender. So the parents must understand this, that there is nothing wrong with the children at all, okay? In fact, but because the way some members of the society view those who are different from themselves, these children are at risk of being bullied, right? And has been mentioned before in this course, that the best thing for a parent to do is to provide support and to their child and seek professional help. The best thing to tell you is to talk to the people who are experts and professional in this field to provide adequate support to your child. Gender identity versus sexual orientation. The concept of sexual orientation refers to who an individual is sexually attracted to. So this does not generally become evident, however, until later in the childhood. Gender identity, on the other hand, refers to a way a person identifies themselves during early childhood. Though gender identity and sexual orientation are quite different in terms of development. And some children who are gender non-conforming can grow up to identify with many other identifications. So parents should understand that like a person with gender identity, their sexual orientation cannot be changed. We already established that early on, that this cannot be changed. And what causes it for people to seek the new orientation? I think the cause is unknown. So gender identity and mental health. All gender non-conforming children are at a high risk of mental health issues and bullying. A large number of teen suicide attempts have links to sexuality and gender identity. Parents of these children must be aware of the fact and take a role that shows respect, understanding, and support to that child who's having a non-conforming gender. The best thing for the parent to do is to take non-judgmental approach to gain the child's trust and help them through these difficult times. I think it's very critical for parents and caregivers to really be non-judgmental. We're not in the position to judge anyone, right? So, especially what children are going through in life, and if it's something that is being if research is establishing it has something to do with biological or social, I think we need to work on better our environment and what's going on around us than to judge those who are somehow non-conforming. And I think that's the best thing to do. And the research shows that the supportive families, friends and family members and extended family and the school systems that are supportive of these children significantly can help reduce the risk of suicide. So I think that's just that's an ethical responsibility on every single human being who believes in the sanctity of the life of a human life, is to be there to support and provide help as needed, instead of sitting down and judging others and not being able to put themselves in someone else's shoe. Right now, there's something that is very upsetting, is that we sit outside and we judge others, but no one really cares to see, what if it is me, what if it is you who are facing these challenges, right? So instead of sitting down and making into a gossip session or some sort of a this craziness of judging others, look for solutions and see what you can do to contribute. As it wisely being said, is the beauty of us to do something is to do something good, or to at least stay silent. Lastly, folks, conclusion. It can be challenging for parents and caregivers to raise a gender non-conforming child. They have to deal with lots of uncertainty. I mean, I can understand the parents and what they have to go through, and the school system and the extended family and the siblings and even the community, some of whom might not be very accepting. So, of course, there are people who are not going to accept it, but that doesn't change the fact, and that does not change the challenge that is out there, right? You can sit in your bubble and say, oh, I don't accept this and I don't accept that, but good luck with that attitude. Many organizations offer support for children and families who are dealing with the gender or sexuality identification. You can search for local groups in your community and who provide support. Many families also find it helpful to meet the medical and psychological professional for consultation, not only as an individual, but as a whole family, a couple, or group. Folks, this concludes our last end of the module number 19. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's look at what we are going to do in module number 20. We're reaching towards the end of the last 2-3 modules. Good luck to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of the night. Thank you all very much for watching.